What's going on, guys, and welcome back to F1 2021 for My Team Career Mode Season 4, round number 5. That was a little bit of a tongue twister there, the Canadian Grand Prix. Now, first of all, if you hear any barking in this video, my dog is literally just outside my window next to me. He's kind of just staring at me. I've just given him his dinner, so you may hear some puppy barks throughout this video, so apologies for that if that is the case. But yeah, we're here today with the Canadian Grand Prix. So we've had a good start to this season so far. As you can see here, we've had some great results. We've had a win in Imola, 3rd place in China, 5th in Portugal, and 2nd last time out in Spain after a pretty amazing defense and a crazy defense. Now we're going into Montreal, Canada. Ferrari and Red Bull have somewhat caught up. I mean, they're right at the top there with myself, or my team, and Mercedes now. So I think it's fairly safe to say that my team, Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, and probably McLaren are all fully upgraded. I'm not sure about the rest of the teams. They're a little bit further back, but I think a lot of the teams now, at least like the top 7 teams maybe, are probably fully upgraded, or at least right there. So yeah, we're pretty much at the max that we can get with. I mean, there's still teams like Haas, Alpine, and Williams who are definitely not fully upgraded yet, but most teams are pretty much there, I think. So it should be interesting for the rest of this career mode season, and just the rest of the career mode in general. Q1 goes by and we end up P12, but I did only have one quick run because I thought, well, it's good enough to get me through, so I didn't bother going again. The usual suspects out there, both Haas's, both Williams, and both Alpines. In Q2 it would be wet, only intermediate tyres, but it would still be quite wet here, and believe this was my, well, I kind of, when I do the runs, I usually do 2 laps, like 2 push laps, and that gets me through the amount of fuel that I can go for, you know. I just feel like it's better to do that than to just have 1 push lap, because you generally have enough fuel to do 2 push laps and and you know, your in lap. So yeah, just how it works out. We only managed P10 because towards the end of the session the track was getting a little bit better, and I went out for a final run, but I just clipped the wall and got a little bit of wing damage, so I didn't put in a quicker time, but thankfully I just about got through. No real shocks out there in Q2, although Mercedes of Guan Yu Zhou, the rest of it, I think it was both Aston Martins, Yuki Tsunoda, and both Alfa Romeos, so fairly standard stuff going into Q3 here. And as we go, we are on now the fastest lap in my Q3 session. It's still wet, as you can very much see. Intermediate tyres still though, but yeah, still very wet. And we're purple through the first sector. We already have the quickest lap. We do go a bit too deep into that corner though, just braked a bit too late, and that is going to cost us. We're actually now a little bit down on time after having a purple first sector, but we go a little bit early on the brakes through this next corner, but we were even worse the first time round, so we actually back up into the green again, and it's going to be just a green middle sector here because of that, you know, late braking into one of those corners. We don't get a purple sector, but it is green. We've actually got George Russell, if you can see on the minimap, right behind us, so he's going to be the next one to cross the line after us here as we fly down the main straight here, deploy as much ERS as we dare. Oh, well, actually no, we can't because we don't have ERS because it's qualifying. Never mind, and there's no DRS because it is wet, but it's been a pretty damn good final sector, and it definitely is. It's purple final sector, we go quickest, but then George Russell does beat us, and then in the end Charles Leclerc beats us as well. He is on provisional pole for Ferrari, but George Russell is up there on the front row in P2, and we are there in P3. It is the first time this season, 5 rounds in, that both me and Russell, that we're both up there in the top 3 in this case, so this should be good for the race.
Bonjour! It's time once again to go racing here in Montreal, the 2nd largest French-speaking city in the world, and home since 1978 to the Canadian Grand Prix. It's a tricky circuit to tackle in wet conditions, with top speed still of critical importance down the long back straight. There are 2.7 miles and 14 corners overall on a circuit that in the dry can see average lap speeds of around 130 miles per hour. We'll be lucky to get anywhere near that today. Also here, of course, is Anthony Davidson, a new name for an old team. Let's take a look at AlphaTauri. There've been some tweaks to the power unit regulations, of course, and I have to say it doesn't seem, so far at least, that they've been able to keep up.
It doesn't look promising for them so far. And if the new regs have hit them as hard as we think, well, I suspect they may need a few late nights at the factory to get back on track.
Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting race. Charles Leclerc lines up on pole position, and starting next to them is George Russell. Moving on to the rest of the grid, we have Shaw, Hamilton, Sergio Perez and Verstappen, Giovinazzi, Sainz, Gasly and Lando Norris, Joe, Vettel, Lance Stroll and Tsunoda, Islet, Latifi, Esteban Ocon and Christian Lundgaard, Fernando Alonso, Matsushita, Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin. Which of these talented drivers will come out on top today?
Alright, so here we go for the Canadian Grand Prix in Season 4. We won here last season, had a great little battle with our teammate Daniel Ricciardo. So what can we do from the second row of the grid today? We are underway and it's a decent start, but a bit hesitant from all of us obviously in the ramp. But we get a bit of a better start than Russell, our teammate, and we're side by side with him through the first couple of corners here, trying to hang it round the outside. It's a battle that we haven't had a whole lot of in this career mode so far, because we just have never been on the same bit of track at the same time really, just with, you know, either myself starting way down the back of the grid or Russell starting way down the back. But this time we actually have a little bit of a battle, but it's only for a couple of corners because we managed to get up ahead of Russell, and it's a good start for us up into P2. But Leclerc has already managed to make a little bit of a gap to myself. He's had a great start off pole position and is storming off into the lead, but now we've got to get our head down that we've got past George Russell, our teammate. But I mean, you can look at the gap already to Leclerc. It's, you know, it's a 1.5 second gap already to the leader. So we've got to really put our head down and try and catch up to him, get some good pace going here, because we know from qualifying and just from previous running at this track, this is a pretty quick track for me. It is one of my best tracks on the game. It's one of my favourite tracks on the game to drive as well. Just really love the fast flowing nature of it, and yeah, we could potentially be going for our first kind of double track win here if we can go for it. Leclerc sets the fastest lap of the race, and he's actually pulled a couple of tenths on us that lap as well. And a little bit further on, he's now even further ahead, just over 2 seconds I think that is ahead of us. He's really storming off at the front here, but this lap around we're starting to put the pressure down, and we've gone purple through the first sector, and we're coming through now. We are doing absolutely as much as we can, but Leclerc just pulling away at the front at the moment. As we look back to Leclerc's teammate Carlos Sainz, he has not had the greatest luck, well, in this whole career mode, to be completely honest. Last season was an absolute shambles for him, and this season hasn't been going too well for him this so far either. But at the moment he finds himself behind Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, fighting for a decent kind of, I think, like P6, maybe P7 position here. So he's doing a decent enough job, but yeah, definitely not quite at the height of his teammate. Speaking of his teammate, he is in front of us, and we are starting to somewhat close up on him as my team gives us a bit of a strategy change with the pit stops there. We're starting to close up to Leclerc a little bit, but just slight little issues from me, and we lose that advantage. We do seem, when we get a really good lap, really good pace down, we are the quicker car, the quicker driver, just about, as you can see, purple lap time for us, fastest lap of the race. But we do keep making little mistakes, which just lose a couple of tenths here and there. As we have a look, there's not a whole lot of action going on here, I'm going to be honest. This seems to happen quite a lot in the wet races. I mean, you either get it where there's a crash because of the wet nature of the track and some crazy stuff happens, but if that doesn't happen, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of overtaking going on. Everybody just kind of runs one by one in a line, and that's kind of what's happening here as we're having a look at, I believe this is Sebastian Vettel in the Aston Martin, just kind of hanging off the back of the top 10 here. And yeah, just not really a whole lot of action going on. It really isn't. We're already on lap 13, as you can see here, and I have just managed to dip under the 1 second margin on Leclerc. We're flying once again another purple sector through sector 1 here, and we're really catching up to the back of Leclerc here. We're absolutely pulling away from George Russell and the rest of the grid. So it seems like myself and Leclerc, we're kind of in a league of our own here on pace, and I'm just pushing to the absolute limits to try and catch up to him here before the pit stop phase, and we are doing that. We're just under a second, but finding it difficult to get any more than that, because just with the dirty air and everything, it's quite difficult once you get into that 1 second gap to really make any roads. And on this lap number 18, Leclerc comes in for his probably one and only pit stop onto another set of intermediate tyres, because it is forecast to pretty much have the same level of rain throughout this whole race. So yeah, probably just going to be the one pit stop here unless anything drastic changes. Next lap around, lap 19, we're going to come in for our pit stop. Wasn't too worried about Leclerc getting an undercut on us. I mean, he was already in front of us anyway, but I wasn't too worried about him, you know, gaining more of an advantage, because when you're going from intermediate to intermediate, the tyre, they don't, I don't know, there's not quite the same kind of, you know, degradation as there is on the dry tyres. So I wasn't really too bothered about that. And in fact, it's actually worked out even better, because we've managed to get an overcut on Leclerc. So we are into the lead of the Canadian Grand Prix, which is awesome for us as Leclerc tries to put some pressure on us with those more warmed up tyres. Of course, our tyres pretty damn cold just coming out of the pits. We've got to warm them up, but he's got brand new spanking but slightly warmed up tyres. So yeah, a little bit unfortunate that I've just jumped him in the pits. I would have liked a bit more of a battle. Speaking of jumping in the pits as well, we've got Antonio Giovinazzi here, Lewis Hamilton coming out of the pits here, and Giovinazzi's managed to jump Giovinazzi in the pit stops, and he is now behind his teammate Sergio Perez. So yeah, awesome battle. Well, I say awesome battles going on here, not really, because people are just, the only overtakes that are happening at the moment are in pit stops, so it's not the most exciting. For a few laps here, I do have quite a bit of pressure from Leclerc behind. He's definitely putting on the pressure as I go quite deep into the hairpin, and he has a sneaky little look up the inside, but just can't quite do anything. In these conditions, just getting up the inside and managing to get the power down is just so difficult that I can run that wider line and generally just be a bit more careful on the power and keep the position. As we look once again at Carlos Sainz, but he's got an issue. There's smoke coming out of the back of that Ferrari, and it's terrible stuff for Sainz once again here. He has had a terrible time in this career mode of ours, and he is retiring from the Canadian Grand Prix. That's one Ferrari down, and of course it's Sainz. He just has all the bad luck in this complete career. These last 2 seasons have been awful for him, as Leclerc gets a little bit of a slide actually through the final corner there, but he's still somewhat putting pressure on the back of us here. He really was putting quite a lot of pressure on me up until this point here, but he does just about now start to fade away a little bit, and yeah, we start to pull a little bit of a gap on him. But there was definitely a good, I'd say a good 7 or 8 laps where he was putting considerable pressure on us, but as you can see, we're now over a second ahead of him, and we're actually coming to blue flag lap. The Haas cars up ahead. Schumacher actually behind Mazepin at the moment, so Mazepin, I'm guessing, just managed to get Schumacher off the line and is currently ahead. So Schumacher pulls to the side. We don't want to have any issues with him like we did in Imola. That was a terrible, well, almost a terrible moment there as we go a little bit too late on the brakes into this corner, trying to get past Mazepin here. He doesn't let us pass before the hairpin, but coming down at the kind of back straights here, he does go to the inside very quick here. Only just managed to get past him before the braking zones. That's hopefully going to slow down Leclerc a little bit, but by this point he's not putting as much pressure on me, although he did manage to catch up a little bit under these blue flags. I think just with the dirty air and everything, he's right there now, pretty much at a second's gap, as Matsushita lets us pass in the Williams there, and he very nearly has a look into the hairpin. I get a bit worried there because you let AI pass and then they still kind of sometimes dive you into the hairpin even though they're getting lapped, so it's a bit ridiculous sometimes. But we have a little look here at a battle that might finally happen. There's not been a single battle on the grid this whole time, but as Mazepin lets past, I think that was Lewis Hamilton, he ends up in with a battle with Nobuharu Matsushita there, as Matsushita got out of shape by letting Hamilton pass, and it is now too wide going down, and actually Schumacher's managed to jump in front of Matsushita, and he's now alongside his teammate Nikita Mazepin. We haven't had any battles this whole race. The battle we're getting though is a battle of the Haas's, the 2 slowest cars on the grid, although both Haas currently ahead of one of the Williams there, so that's something, but they're too wide down the back straight here. This is awesome to see in these conditions. We never get to focus on these guys because there's, you know, they're always way down the back of the grid. I don't really pay attention to them, but there's just no other action going on in this race, that this was the best action we could get. And Matsushita now giving it everything, trying to get past Mazepin. Schumacher has made the move on his teammate, but for now Mazepin will stay ahead of Matsushita, but he has been overtaken by his teammate. As we continue here, we're still setting pretty good times. To be fair, Leclerc wasn't, you know, we weren't getting away from Leclerc. We'd pull a couple of tenths on him here and there, and then he just managed to pull a bit more out of the bag and close that gap again. But generally, we weren't under crazy threat from him, but we were still a decent amount ahead, and we're a good 5 and a bit, almost I think 6 seconds there ahead of Russell, Perez, and Giovinazzi. So it's not a massive margin, but the problem is, at the start of this race, we were behind Leclerc, but we weren't really fighting him. We were just trying to put pressure on him, so it wasn't that exciting. And then after the pit stops, we got in front of Leclerc. We had a little bit of pressure from behind as I go and set another fastest lap of the Grand Prix, taking that off Giovinazzi, actually, who had it previously. But yeah, Leclerc, he put a little bit of pressure on us, but was never really close enough, and in these conditions never really brave enough to do anything too crazy. So it's been a bit of a boring race as we get a big sideways moment out of the final corner coming onto the final lap of the race, and thankfully Leclerc we did pull quite a decent gap to him, because he catches right back up to us here after that slide. That could have been a race ending slide there and a collision into the wall on the final lap of the Grand Prix, but thankfully, we just about managed to save it as we, I think, head past Fernando Alonso in the other Williams car, and coming around on this final lap of the race. Leclerc now behind Alonso as well, trying to get past, but actually Alonso not letting him pass into the hairpin there, so even more time lost for Leclerc. But he's not going to be able to do anything anyway, because we've just kind of got lucky here. We were the quickest man on track by a considerable margin, although Leclerc did give us a run for our money. We were a fair way ahead of Russell and the Red Bulls and everybody else. Leclerc gave us a little bit of a run for our money, but in the end, we are the champions of Canada for a second time. It is another win here in Montreal.
Great work, guys. Great work all weekend. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
And you hear my new radio message, I think, for the first time, because for whatever reason, when I won in Imola, it didn't actually play my radio message. So we got it this time though, got the radio message, got the race win, driver of the day as well, coming from 3rd to 1st because there wasn't much action elsewhere. It was a good day.
That's it then for another magnificent Canadian Grand Prix, and they've hung on to take a sublime victory here today. Tell me, Ant, how did they manage to achieve this win?
Well, keeping their tyre temperatures up in the tricky wet conditions was really important. There's not much grip out there at the best of times, and it's 10 times worse if you're out there on cold tyres. So the way they kept the rubber in its proper operating window was a huge advantage today.
Well, I'm thoroughly exhausted after the excitement of that race, but I'm sure it's nothing compared to our drivers here. They've worked hard to make it up there, and it's great to see them make their way out onto the podium.
So there we go, it's another win, second win of the season for us in Canada this time around. Leclerc comes home for P2. He's going to get into the championship fight a little bit more, and Russell with another podium here, P3, second podium after his win last time out. It's a good result for us, good result for the team, and now we're just going to be pulling a gap in the championship. But unfortunately this was probably one of the most boring races I've had for myself, but also just for making the video and everything, and probably for you guys as well, because that Haas battle was really the only battle that was going on that happened this whole race. So really unfortunate in that regard. Sorry that this is probably not the most exciting of episodes of this career mode, and you guys have waited like 2 weeks for it as well, because I've been pretty busy with work the last week or so, but I've finally got round to it here. If we look at the Drivers' Championship though, we now have a 40-point lead over Sergio Perez, who's now second. Leclerc moves to 4th, Leclerc to 3rd, Norris to 4th. George Russell stays there in 5th, but is closing, well, not really closing the gap to me, but closing the gap to the rest of the cars up ahead. And in the Constructors' Championship, we are still ahead. McLaren still second, although not the best race weekend for them. Red Bull go to 3rd, Ferrari move up to 4th. They haven't had the greatest start to the season, but this is a good result from Leclerc here. And Aston Martin moved down to 5th, so unfortunately Aston Martin, great start. I mean, they won the first round of the season, but yeah, they're starting to kind of go backwards a little bit now, unfortunately. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.